Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 SUVs in Grand Theft Auto Online. Now the first 5 SUVs on this list are going to be all my personal opinion for what are some of the best and coolest SUVs in the game, as well as some of the rarest SUVs in the game. However, the top 5 in this list is actually going to be based off of the best 5 SUVs you can get in the entire game when it comes to actually racing. So anyway guys, let's hop into it, starting off with number 10. Alright guys, starting off the list with number 10, we have the ENUS Huntley S. I can go on and on about the ENUS Huntley S for days. I absolutely love this SUV. It was one of the first SUVs that was actually added into Grand Theft Auto Online with DLC, which kind of gives it a special place in this game. Now, not to mention, the Huntley S is still one of the fastest SUVs in the game. I believe this thing is either number 7 or 8 right now when it comes to racing in Grand Theft Auto Online in terms of lap times, which is very impressive considering this car was added in early 2014 or late 2013. I can't really remember which, it's one of the two. So obviously that means the Huntley actually has some pretty good performance under its belt. This thing is very quick, it handles really nicely. Of course it is an SUV, so it can seat 4 players, which is, you know, a pretty good feature. You can roll around with 3 of your friends while you drive, and it's a pretty good looking SUV in my opinion. I know not everybody is a super huge fan of the looks of this vehicle. However, I think that it's kind of got a unique design to it. You might not like it, you might like it, who really cares? It's a pretty good SUV. I think it definitely deserves to be on this list. Anyway guys, that is it for number 10. Let's move on to number 9. Alright guys, next up at number 9, we have the Benefactor XLS. This was also a car that was added pretty early on in Grand Theft Auto Online. I want to say this came out with the CEO update, which was a pretty great update in this game. Now the Benefactor XLS is actually a pretty quick vehicle in terms of racing as well. However, it is not this version of the XLS that is very fast. It is actually the armored version of the XLS. It is within the top 10 fastest SUVs in the entire game, even still to this day, and it's armored, so you can kind of boot all of the other SUVs around a little bit when you're actually racing against them, which is a pretty good feature. Now the XLS, for what it is a pretty luxurious SUV. I feel like the interior might say otherwise. It's got the same interior as the ENUS Jubilee, which is a real shame that they still haven't changed that. Regardless, the XLS is a pretty fantastic SUV. This thing is no slouch, even though it's the unarmored version of it. And of course, having the ability to buy an armored version of this SUV is also a pretty cool feature, I think. Overall, the XLS has pretty good looks, I feel like. You might not like it, you might like it. It's pretty similar to the Huntley in that regard. A lot of people like this thing, a lot of people don't like it. What I can tell you is a lot of people don't even know that the Benefactor XLS even exists. This car is so sick, and it is very underrated. I would highly recommend picking this thing up if you guys don't have one already. It's actually a pretty cheap SUV, and even the armored variant of it is also pretty cheap. Less than $1 million for sure. So kind of a bargain these days if you ask me. Anyway guys, that's it for number 9. Let's move on to number 8. Alright guys, next up at number 8, we have the brand new Grainger 3600 LX. And I know what you're thinking, this thing is way too high on the list. Well, hear me out. This thing is actually slower than the regular Grainger that has been in the game since 2013, which is a complete bummer. However, it does have some very good options with it. You can of course put armor on this thing, you can put Imani Tech, a missile lock-on jammer, or the ability to remotely control the vehicle as well. It also has some great customization that you can do to it, which I really like, and overall, the look of this vehicle is pretty spot on to the Chevy Suburban or the Chevy Tahoe in real life. It's got to get some respect for sure, and that's why it's on this list, period. Now the Grainger 3600 LX is actually pretty quick if you ask me. It's slower than the regular Grainger, but the regular Grainger isn't really that big of a slouch these days. I'm not actually sure where it ranks in terms of the SUV hierarchy for racing. However, I feel like the Grainger 3600 LX is fast enough. If it was faster, sure, it would be great, but it's fast enough for my liking personally. This vehicle is really cool, and as far as new vehicles go in GTA, this thing only costs $1,036,000, which is pretty damn cheap these days for a brand new vehicle especially. And for that price, you do get a really awesome car that you can put Imani Tech on, machine guns, oil slick proximity mine droppers. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this thing. Overall, I believe this thing is an absolutely fantastic SUV. It's a shame to rank it this high, but it's just not that fast, so I just couldn't justify putting it any higher. And there's some really cool SUVs up ahead of this thing, so I hope that you guys don't hate me for putting this thing super high on the list. This is where it ranks, in my opinion at least. Let's move on to number 7. Alright guys, next up at number 7 we have the Benefactor Dubsta 2. This is a super rare car in Grand Theft Auto Online. A lot of players don't even know that there's a difference between the Dubsta 1 and the Dubsta 2. Most players don't even know that there is a Dubsta 2 in this game. This thing can only be spawned in by doing a certain sequence of things within GTA Online, which makes it a little bit challenging to get. Some players have a real struggle getting this thing. I know for me, it actually took me over an hour to get mine to spawn in. I actually have a video on how to get this thing if you guys are interested in that. I will link it in the description down below. And also I have a video comparing the Dubsta 2 to the Dubsta 1 if you are curious to know the differences between the two vehicles. I will go over some of the differences right now, one of them being the offset wheel cover, and this thing is actually unremovable on the Dubsta 2 in comparison to the Dubsta 1. So the Dubsta 2 has a few more things than that. I won't spoil all of them. If you guys really want to check it out, the video is in the description. Now the Dubsta 2 is not ranked any higher than this because it is not one of the fastest vehicles in the game. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. This thing is actually pretty darn slow. It can get going pretty quick if you drive straight for a long enough time. The handling of it is honestly not that bad either, but I just couldn't justify putting it any higher on the list. It really is only this high on the list because it is a rare vehicle and because it has okay performance. Overall, the Dubsta 2 is definitely deserving of being on this list, and I definitely think a lot more players should try to go out and get one of these for themselves. It is a really cool vehicle. Anyway guys, I think that's pretty much it for number 7. Let's move on to number 6. Alright guys, next up at number 6 we have the Gallivanter Baller ST. This is one of the faster SUVs in the top half of this top 10 list, and it's also probably the best looking SUV, maybe even on the entire list. It depends how much you like Range Rovers. When they added this thing with the contract DLC, I got super hyped because I am a pretty big fan of Range Rovers in real life, and to see one that has this many customization options and this much detail done to it was absolutely awesome. This thing has pretty much unrivaled customization as far as any of the Gallivanter Ballers in the game go, and it has the best performance out of all of the Gallivanter Ballers as well. So it's my favorite Gallivanter Baller, I gotta say that. Now as far as the performance goes, this thing does have the same Gallivanter Baller-esque wheel spin off the line that all of them do in this entire game. When you first start out, all the wheels spin for a few seconds and there's nothing you can really do about it. However, the ST definitely manages it a little bit better than all of the other ballers, so that is a good thing. Now the ST does have a fair bit of understeer, which is a very annoying feature about this thing. I really wish that it didn't have this understeer, but unfortunately it does. Really like how that guy turned into me, by the way. The ST is really quick in a straight line, which is a very nice feature with this thing. A lot of SUVs can be pretty quick in a straight line, but the ST is definitely quicker than most of the vehicles that have been behind this thing on this list so far. Overall, the ST is an absolutely fantastic SUV. I would highly recommend getting this thing, especially if you're a fan of Gallivanter Ballers. I was able to actually obtain 2 of these things for free during the Christmas update because you could actually get them for free. Rockstar was giving away a $1 million plus SUV. I know, it's pretty unbelievable. I hope that you guys were able to snag some of these when they were free, but if not, you'll probably have to pay for one, which is pretty unfortunate. As of the time of recording this video, these are not actually available to be bought, so I'm not really sure of the price of this, but whatever the price is, I would say it's probably worth it to pay it, and you should definitely buy one. Anyway guys, that is it for the vehicles that are just based on my opinion. Let's get into the factually sound vehicles on this list, the top 5 fastest SUVs in the game right now, as far as racing goes. Let's start it off with number 5. Alright guys, the 5th fastest SUV in the entire game right now is of course the ENUS Jubilee that was added with the contract DLC. This thing is an absolutely fantastic vehicle. Now there is a bit of controversy with this thing, as I'm sure you guys are aware. The interior of this car is absolutely abhorrent. It is awful. Rockstar completely failed with this car as far as the interior goes. However, what they did not fail with is the exterior, thankfully. This car is of course based off of a Rolls Royce Cullinan in real life, and Rockstar pretty much knocked it out of the park with this vehicle. It's absolutely fantastic looking, and the performance of it luckily is also very good, hence it being the 5th fastest SUV in the game at the time of recording this video. Now the Jubilee handles more like a sports car in my opinion than it does like an SUV. It definitely still feels a little bit heavy. It really does handle amazingly well, and it also has crazy good acceleration. So the ENUS Jubilee is is really just a force to be reckoned with when it comes to racing. Pretty much all of the top 5 SUVs are actually pretty comparable when it comes to racing. You could potentially be winning with the 5th fastest car, which is of course this thing, because the number 1 car is really not that much faster. It's a bit faster, but it's not that much faster. Pretty much all of the top 5 are pretty competent cars when it comes to racing, so kind of take your pick. Although the number 1 car is definitely proven to be faster, all of the cars are still going to be pretty competitive. Overall, the ENUS Jubilee is definitely a car that I would recommend picking up. As long as you avoid looking at the interior of this car and just stick to the exterior, the Jubilee is not so bad. It's a pretty good looking car, performs well, it's pretty good. Anyway guys, let's move on to number 4. Alright guys, next up at number 4 is of course the amazing Rebla GTS. This is one of my favorite SUVs in the entire game, and I'm very happy to report that it is the 4th fastest SUV around a track in this game. So the Rebla GTS not only looks great, but it also performs extremely well. This thing has really great customization options that you can do to it. You can make it look like a BMW X5M, or you can make it look like a pretty bare bones BMW X5. Overall, I absolutely love the customization options that you can equip this thing with. I think it is absolutely fantastic. As far as the performance goes, the handling of this vehicle is probably its best feature, right next to the acceleration. Its top speed is a little bit weak, but what it lacks in top speed can be made up for with its really good acceleration and its absolutely fantastic handling. This thing has a really unique upgrade option where you can pretty much slam this thing right to the ground, which definitely gives it better handling than most SUVs in the game, so that is a pretty big advantage when it comes to racing, obviously. The other advantage that this thing has is that all the other players in your SUV's race will be absolutely staring at you because this car is just so good looking, at least in my opinion. Anyway guys, the Rebla GTS is a must own in this game in my opinion. Absolutely fantastic car. It looks so realistic. There's really nothing wrong with this thing at all that I can see. I think that you guys should definitely pick this thing up if you don't have one already. Anyway guys, I think that's pretty much it for number 4. Let's move on to number 3. Alright guys, next up at number 3 we have the Pfister Astron. This thing is mildly faster than the Rebla GTS. It has better acceleration and it has a little tiny bit better handling. On top of that, it is a really good looking car, at least from the front of the vehicle and from the side. However, the further back you go, the more you realize that there's something wrong here. That hatchback on this thing it's not right. It's too far forward at the top. I don't know. Doesn't look all that great in my opinion, but the rest of the car is absolutely fantastic looking. The front of this thing literally looks exactly like a Porsche Macan Turbo in real life or a Porsche Macan GTS, so that is pretty good. The interior of this vehicle is also pretty fantastic, and of course, like all the other SUVs, you can sit 4 players, which is pretty good. And like I mentioned, the performance of this thing is slightly better than the Rebla GTS, which is a little bit unfortunate because I kind of like the Rebla a little bit better, but the Astron is much quicker in a straight line. However, the handling on this thing is not nearly as good as the Rebla GTS, so it does have that over the Pfister Astron. Overall, the Astron is a pretty good vehicle. It was of course added with the contract DLC that just came out recently, so it's still pretty fresh in GTA. Not many players actually drive this thing too much in online, I've found, so it's a little bit underrated maybe from this DLC. Most players are going to be driving the Granger 3600 LX or the Patriot Mil-Spec because of their respective Imani Tech upgrades. So the Astron kind of has a place of its own in this game when it comes to contract DLC SUVs. It's really the only one that they added that doesn't really have any Imani Tech or like special upgrades, so it's kind of on its own. It's a good SUV, pretty good for racing. I would probably recommend picking this thing up. Anyway guys, I think that's pretty much it for number 3. Let's move on to number 2. Alright guys, next up at number 2 we have the Lampanatti Novak. Now, this thing is the 2nd fastest SUV in the game for racing. Of course, that's why it's at number 2. This thing kind of improves on the Rebla GTS in pretty much every way. Its acceleration is a tiny bit weaker, I want to say, but its handling is pretty good. Now once you actually start going with this thing, it does soak up bumps really well. It's kind of similar to the Italy GTO in that way. It definitely doesn't have as much downforce as the Rebla does, and its top end acceleration is definitely a bit better. However, I would give the edge when starting off to the Rebla GTS. Overall though, the Lampanatti Novak is an absolutely fantastic SUV. This thing is very close on number 1's heels. Now I personally don't really love the Novak myself. The handling of it kind of bothers me. Like I said, it's really bouncy, kind of like the Italy GTO. GTO, except it doesn't really have the downforce that the GTO has, so it's a little bit hard to control on occasion, especially when you're racing on the street. So that is something that you are going to want to keep in mind if you choose to buy this vehicle. The handling is not fantastic, however it is not bad either. It's pretty much personal preference, but I personally don't really love the Novak that much, but that might just be me. I know there's a lot of people who swear by this thing, and I don't blame them. It is really quick in a straight line, it feels like, and the handling, I'm assuming when you get really used to it, is quite good. Overall, the Novak of course is a 4-seater, and it does have some decent customization options. I'm not going to hate on it. It's a really good SUV. You guys should probably buy it if you have some extra money. However, the car that's at number 1 is less than half the price of this thing, and it is technically faster around a racetrack. So let's get into number 1. You guys probably already know what car it is. Alright guys, at number 1 we of course have the Pegassi Toros. You probably saw this coming from a mile away. The Toros is the fastest SUV when it comes to racing in the entire game, and personally the Toros is one of my favorites. I don't really like it as much as the Rebel GTS as far as looks go, but as far as performance goes, there's nothing that beats this thing. Now, not to mention the Toros does also have a lot of really great customization options, but this thing pretty much blows all of these other SUVs out of the water when it comes to handling, acceleration, and top speed is the biggest thing that the Toros has an advantage in. The Toros's top speed is considerably higher than the other two vehicles, which is definitely something that helps this thing out a lot when it actually comes to racing, especially if it's on a longer circuit with a lot of straightaways. The Toros's handling is not bad by any means. It's honestly an underrated feature of the vehicle. It does kind of understeer a little bit, but the back end is pretty tail happy, so it's kind of a weird balance. But if you get it under control, it's really easy to actually operate. The Toros is a bit of a tank itself too. You can knock vehicles out of the way with this thing pretty easily, and the Toros doesn't seem to really care about it too much. The Toros is a fantastic vehicle, and you guys should definitely all buy it, especially considering the price. This thing actually goes for $498,000, meaning it is actually one of the cheapest SUVs on this list, and it's also the fastest. Overall, there's really nothing wrong with the Toros. Unless you just have a personal thing against it, you should really consider buying this thing. It is absolutely fantastic. It has all the other great SUV features, like it of course being 4-door, except it's also 4-door and literally the fastest SUV in the game, while being one of the cheaper SUVs in the game too. The Toros is fantastic. You guys should definitely pick one of these things up. Anyway guys, there you have it. That has been my top 10 SUVs in Grand Theft Auto Online. Let me know in the comments down below if you think that I missed any. Let me know what SUVs you would replace them with. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. If you guys enjoyed this video or you found it helpful, a like is of course appreciated. Dislike if you didn't. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.